My granddaughter called me a burden. That was the first thing I said aloud that night, child. The words slipped from my mouth like a wound reopening, and the silence that followed was heavier than the roof above us. You were sitting across from me, legs tucked under you on the old rug, the glow of the fire painting your face. You looked up at me with those curious eyes, the same eyes your grandfather once had. I did not mean for you to hear my heart break, but perhaps it was time. Time for you to know who I was before I became the woman everyone sees today, grey hair, bent back, quiet steps. Time for you to know that before they called me a burden, I carried more weight than any of them could ever imagine. It was last winter, cold enough to freeze the windows from inside. I had Clara, yes, your Aunt Clara, speaking low but sharp, her voice like a knife. She thought I was asleep in the next room. She's useless now, Clara said. All she does is sit in that chair, knitting and sighing. We are the ones paying the bills, cooking the meals. What's the point of keeping her here? And then, Michael, my own son, your father, stayed quiet. Quiet, child. Silence can cut deeper than words. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and I thought about all the nights I walked miles in the snow to bring food home. I thought of the hours my hands bled scrubbing floors so he could have shoes without holes. I thought of your grandfather, gone too soon, and how I kept this family alive when the world seemed set on taking everything. And now, to them, I was a burden. But you see, child, I did not shout. I did not weep in front of them. Instead, I sat very still and listened to every cruel syllable. I stored it away like one stores dry wood for winter, knowing someday it would burn. The next morning, when the house was still hushed, I heard a knock at the door. Not gentle, not polite, but heavy, urgent. My heart leapt, because in that sound, I knew something had shifted. But before I tell you what came with that knock, you must understand how I came to this place. You must know the path that carried me from a young girl with nothing but hope in her pocket to an old woman with scars hidden beneath. I was born in a town smaller than this one, in a house with walls soaking the wind sun through them every night. My mother died when I was 10. My father was a kind man but poor, and poverty has a way of stripping kindness until nothing is left but survival. By 15, I was working in kitchens, my hands blistered from scrubbing iron pots, my feet swollen from standing all day. But I dreamed, child. I dreamed of a family of my own, of a warm home filled with laughter. And when I met your grandfather, John, I thought my prayers had been answered. He was strong, not just in his arms but in his heart. He held my hands like they were treasures, even though they were rough and scarred. We married young, too young some said, but love does not follow calendars. Life gave us little and asked much. John worked the mills, I sewed clothes for neighbors. We saved every penny, not for ourselves, but for the children we hoped to raise better than we had been raised. Then came Michael. I held him in my arms and thought, here is my reason. Here is my proof that all the pain has meaning. But life is never kind for long. John fell sick when Michael was only 6. The doctor spoke of lungs filled with dust from the mills, of days numbered. I sat by his bed every night, holding his hand while he struggled to breathe. When he died, I buried not only my husband but also the laughter in my house. Still, I did not give up. I worked harder. I walked before the sun, walked 2 houses across town, cleaned floors until my back screamed, just to keep bread on the table. Michael grew, and so did my sacrifices. I tell you all this, child, not for pity but for truth. Because one day, you will hear whispers too. You will feel eyes judging you, dismissing you, trying to make you smaller. And when that day comes, remember your grandmother. Remember the woman who was told she was useless, and yet held her family together when it was falling apart. That knock on the door, the one I told you about. It was not just wood knitting wood. It was fate demanding to be let in. But that, child, is a story for another night. Tonight, you must carry with you only this: I was never a burden. I was the foundation. And foundations may be unseen, but they are what keep the house standing. Child, do you remember how I told you about that heavy knock at the door? That sound was no accident. It came like thunder, breaking through the silence of the morning, and it set in motion the truth I had carried in secret for years. I was sitting in my chair by the window, my shawl wrapped tight, when the sound echoed through the small house. My heart leapt, not from fear, but from knowing. I had been waiting for this day, though no one around me suspected it. I rose slowly and opened the door. Standing there was Mr. Harris, the lawyer who had known your grandfather since we were barely older than you are now. He looked tired, his hat dusted with frost, but his eyes were steady. In his hands was an envelope, thick, official, heavy with the weight of everything it carried. "Mrs. Whitman," he said, nodding. I let him inside. I had stitched from scraps of old clothes. "I know what they've been saying," he murmured. "But you've been patient. And now they'll have to see the truth." I touched the envelope in his hand, the same one I had secretly asked him to keep safe for all these years. My fingers trembled at the edges of it, not from weakness, but from the memory of why it existed at all. Underscore 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 underscore. Child, you must understand. After your grandfather died, the world seemed eager to take everything from me. The mill closed. The bank came knocking. And I knew that if I faltered even once, Michael would have nothing. So, I did what few expected. I made sure this house, this small, humble home, would remain in my name alone. I saved pennies in a jar hidden beneath the floorboards. I worked nights sewing clothes by candlelight. When neighbors laughed at me for hoarding every cent, I stayed silent. And when my brother passed, God rest him, he left me his little piece of land that I sold to pay off the final note on this house. Every signature, every receipt, every deed, it all lived inside that envelope. My shield. My proof that I was not just an old woman lingering in the corner, but the one who had built and saved the very place they now tried to sell. Underscore 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 underscore. This, please. We've discussed this. The house needs to go. It's too much work, too many bills. You don't understand how things are now. But Mr. Harris cleared his throat. No, Mrs. Whitman understands very well. Perhaps better than anyone in this room. He placed the envelope on the table, the paper whispering as it slid across the wood. Clara's eyes darted to it, suspicion flickering like a shadow. "What's that?" she asked. "Truth," I said simply. Underscore 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 underscore. Child, I will not. He entered the room, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and when he saw Mr. Harris, he frowned. "What's going on?" I looked at my son, the boy I had carried through winters, the man who now stood silent while his wife spoke of selling me away like an old chair. My throat ached, but my words came steady. "You'll know soon enough, Michael," I said. "Because today, the truth will speak louder than any whisper." And with that, Mr. Harris pushed the envelope across the table, its weight thudding like a final bell. Underscore 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 underscore. Child, I see the question in your eyes. What was inside? What happened when they opened it? That is for tomorrow's story. Tonight, I want you to remember only this: no matter how forgotten or dismissed you may feel, there is always a truth waiting to rise. And when it does, it will silence every voice that tried to make you small. Child, lean closer now, for this is the part of my story that has stayed carved deepest into my heart. The morning Mr. Harris laid that envelope on the table, everything I had carried in silence came rushing out into the light. Michael sat down heavily, his brow furrowed. Clara stood with her arms crossed, impatience written all over her face. I sat across from them, my hands folded tight in my lap. The fire popped, shadows danced on the walls, and the air between us was so sharp it could have been cut with a knife. Go ahead, Mr. Harry said calmly, sliding the envelope closer to my son. Open it. Michael hesitated, his fingers resting on the flap. He looked at me, maybe hoping I would stop him, maybe hoping I would spare him. But he finally tore it open, the papers spilled out like a flood. Deeds. Receipts. My brother's land sale contract. The final payment note stamped paid in full from 30 years ago. All the proof that this house, every brick, every nail, every board, was mine. This, Michael whispered, his eyes wide. He flipped through the pages, his voice breaking. Mother, how? I thought. I leaned forward, my voice firm but soft. You thought what, Michael? That your father did it all? That life just handed this roof to you? No, child. I built this house with my hands, with nights of work and days of hunger. I gave up shoes so you could have boots in winter. I stitched until my fingers bled. And all these years, I carried the weight in silence, because I wanted you to feel safe. Clara's face turned pale. She reached for the papers, but Mr. Harris's hand came down firmly over them. These aren't for you, he said. This home belongs solely to Mrs. Whitman. Legally. Permanently. The room fell into silence. You could hear the clock ticking, each second dragging out the truth they didn't want to face. Michael put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook, not from anger, but from shame. Clara looked at him, then at me, but no words came. For once, her sharp tongue had nothing to say. And I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of decades lift from me. My heart ached, yes, but it also... Child, do you know what I told them next? I looked at my son, at the boy I once cradled, and I said, I don't tell you this to shame you, Michael. I tell you this because I want you to know the truth of sacrifice. Love is not loud. It is quiet. It hides in sleepless nights, in calloused hands, in hidden envelopes. Do not mistake silence for weakness. And do not mistake age for uselessness. Tears rolled down his face. He whispered, I'm sorry, Mother. And in that moment, I believed him. But Clara, she turned and walked out of the room, her heels clicking down the hallway. Some hearts, child, take longer to soften. Some may never. That Christmas, I sat at the head of the table. Not because I demanded it, but because Michael pulled out the chair and placed me there himself. For the first time in years, I saw pride in his eyes, not pity, not annoyance, but pride. I watched my grandchildren pass the dishes, laughing, and though Clara's smile was thin, she said nothing. Sometimes, silence is its own surrender. Now, child, as I sit here with you tonight, the fire glowing low and your small hand resting on mine, I want you to remember this lesson above all. Never let anyone tell you that your worth is gone. Never let them measure you by what you can no longer do. A life lived in sacrifice, in love, in quiet survival, that life has more power than greed, more truth than lies. I was called a burden. I was nearly cast aside. But in the end, it was my strength, quiet, steady, unshaken, that held this family together. And one day, when you are older and the world tries to tell you otherwise, I want you to remember your grandmother's story. Remember that even the softest voices can carry the loudest truths. Because, child, love never retires. And neither does dignity.